Talking about one of my favorite things in the world, sauerkraut. The rise of fermented foods popularity, being a small food brand going up against the monsters and working with local farmers. It's all here with my great interview with the CEO of Fermented Food Holdings, coming up in this episode of the Business of Agriculture. Attention farmers, want quick answers to your toughest questions? Meet AGvisorPRO, the innovative mobile app designed just for you. Tap into a network of trusted experts and industry professionals right from your phone. Whether you're seeking advice on crop management or the latest equipment, AGvisorPRO connects you with the answers you need to succeed. Best of all, it's free, so download it on iOS or your Android device. Don't miss out on expert insights that can transform your farming experience. Download AGvisorPRO today and start connecting with the knowledge you need to thrive in the field. Hey there, welcome to another fantastic episode of the Business of Agriculture. I've got a great one for you today. I've been excited about this for a while because when this thing came across my desk, I said, absolutely, I want to talk to this guy because I love sauerkraut. I make sauerkraut. I'm a pretty big player myself, about 24 quarts I did in 2024, but they do more than that. This guy is named Jorge Azevedo. He is the CEO of Fermented Food Holdings. Fermented Food Holdings is kind of an upstart. They bought a couple of existing brands. They moved their headquarters to Wisconsin. They are buying their products, if you will, their cucumbers and their cabbages from local farmers on a contractual basis. They've got some regenerative things working in terms of how they utilize some of their byproducts, and they've got a pretty interesting story. So I'm going to let my friend tell you that, and I'm going to ask the question. So anyway, welcome to the Business of Agriculture, George. Kind of a cool story. You've been with this company for a little while. You are now the CEO. You're doing some interesting stuff, and you came from a huge food background with JBS, one of the big four meat processing companies, and then also with the Kraft Heinz. So you understand food and the business side of it. So anyway, let's dig right into it.
Yeah, thank you for having me here, Damian. It's a pleasure talking to you. We are indeed a growing company, but it's still fairly small in the scale of the food business and the agricultural business. Coming from big behemoths like JBS and Kraft Heinz, it's definitely gives me a great perspective on how much we still have to build.
So the story on FFH, or Fermented Food Holdings. Some people that had some investor money. They had an agricultural bend anyhow, or maybe even came from agriculture, and they said, this looks like a growth area. It was probably a decade ago when my kraut making in my basement became a thing, and then my friends started saying, man, I'm reading all about fermented food and gut health. This is kind of a thing. You should hop onto it. Well, I didn't in any commercial level, but you did. Is that about when it all started becoming a big thing?
It is about where it all started. I mean, fermentation is an ancient food preservation technique, right? Sandor Katz is one of the popes of fermentation in modern era. And you ask him about where does it start, and he'll say fermentation is just inevitable because spoilage is what happens to food. And if you learn to control that, what you get is fermentation. But in recent decades, I'd say probably recent years, it is picking up a lot of steam as people are looking at ways to simplify their diets, to get away from overly processed foods, understand how food can help them feel better. And fermentation delivers on a lot of that. Look, ultimately, it is quite simple. It's about people behavior. People want to eat things that taste good, that makes them feel good, and that they can afford. If you can deliver those three things with food, you're very likely going to have a business. And fermentation really helps deliver on that, right? It makes you feel good. It is very tasty, and it's not an expensive product to have make yourself or to buy. So it delivers on quite a bit. So it's no surprise that there is a good trend going to it.
So big picture, and by the way, if you're listening to this, we're going to get through the whole entire thing about the byproduct that gets utilized back onto the farming fields. We're going to get into all that, about how the contract growers and they're moved to Wisconsin, and then having their producers make them their cucumbers and their cauliflower, or their cabbages. We're going to get all that stuff. But what I want is this big picture about the food thing, because if you're a listener to the Business of Agriculture, you're watching me on my YouTube channel, and I hope you are. If you aren't, please go there and subscribe. We've been digging into this thing about the war on processed food. It's not really a war, but it's a refocusing. Started RFK Jr. Nobody used the word seed oil until a few months ago. And that's really, RFK Jr. is an activist attorney. That's what he is. And activists create salacious terms that then have a stigma attached to them. So that way, when you take them to court and sue them, it's already half the battle's already done because you've already targeted. Monsanto makes nasty toxic chemicals that are in your kids' Fruit Loops. You put that PR out there long enough, you've already got the damn court case won when you sue Monsanto. And I'm not being mean. That's exactly what happened. Nobody's coming after fermented foods. You're in a sweet spot. You are in the center of the store, just like the box of Nabisco from your, former employers, the Chips Ahoy's or any of these things. I know I'm talking about different food companies here. Yeah. Those things, seed oils, ultra processed. It looks like this is a real setting up for a real nice run for something as wholesome as pickles and sauerkraut.
Yeah, you're right. It feels like it really is almost like a PR effort for the natural preservation of foods that we have going on with fermentation. You mentioned you make your sauerkraut at home, and I bet that the process that you follow to make your 12 quarts is not much different than the process that we follow to make 1 million pounds of it. As a matter of fact, in our factories, the batches are anywhere from 1,000 pounds on the smaller, more artisanal front of it, all the way to 2 million pounds on the high side of the production. And the formula is really simple. I can give you the secret ingredient. It's salt. That's all, right? You just shred the cabbage, put salt on it, make sure you mass it pretty good, and let it ferment. And then the bacteria will do its job. It creates a type of acid called lactic acid. It is basically just the bacteria eating up the sugars, and the byproduct is going to be the lactic acid and CO2. The CO2 floats away, the lactic acid is left out in the cabbage, and that's what helps with the preservation. It's very, very natural, and the type of bacteria that live there is the kind of bacteria that is very beneficial to your gut health. It's perfect. It works out really well, and no wonder people are looking after this type of food, specifically as people are getting more and more conscious of the ultra preservation of foods and looking for alternative ways.
By the way, I don't like that George downgraded the size of my operation. He said your 12 quarts is technically double that last year. I did 24 quarts. So
you did 24 quarts.
Just degrading the size of my sauerkraut operation by 50%. Anyway, so by the way, you're exactly right. And that's where a lot of people, when I started making it, said, well, why don't you just buy it at the store? I mean, I get it's kind of your hobby, just like you making your pickles. And I said, well, first off, I think it's a better product than the Vlasic, because that's not kraut. That's cabbage that's been stuck in a vat of vinegar. Vlasic kraut that's what it is. I guess if it's just not what I wanted, because I started getting good kraut like 15 years ago. As you said, all it is, the ingredients are cabbage shredded, put into a crock pot, layered with salt, and then you make sure there's enough water, which becomes brine, over the top of it. It reminds me a little bit of filling the silo on the dairy farm where I was raised. It's kind of a similar thing. You're putting it into a cylinder, you're making sure that it's got the moisture level, and then it goes through its fermentation, and next thing you know, it makes a really tasty and, as you said, healthy product.
It does. And you see a lot in the market now, We heard the term greenwashing in the past, where people had non-sustainable practice and they bring something in. There's a little bit of fermentation washing going on in the industry as well, where people are trying to borrow the idea that they've fermented or lightly fermented something. Yeah. But when you go out and you look at the actual probiotic content of the product, if it has vinegar, it is likely going to have really low probiotic count. It's not going to have gone through, certainly not through the full fermentation process. It might not have gone through fermentation at all. And a lot of the pickles, they taste fantastic. I mean, there are brands of pickles out there that taste great, but they're vinegar-based. And nothing wrong with it. I eat them as well. In other instances, if you want to have a fully fermented, fully loaded probiotic load, looking for a fermented pickle that doesn't have vinegar in the label is probably the best ask.
So, we talked about the health thing, and we talked about where the potential for the business growth is. And I've very much been all over this with different episodes. I had Nick Faraday with Rabo Research on a few weeks ago, the world's largest agricultural lender, and they have guys like him that are just looking at trends, looking at where the money is going, look at where the regulation is going. And it's all about protein. Protein is, I'm drinking a Coke right now. I think it's not going to be long that you're going to grab a Coke and it's going to say, inserted with 4 grams of protein. Protein's hot. Yeah. Fermentation is never going to be as hot because it's not one of the 6 staples of nutrition, protein, carbohydrate, fat, water, mineral, vitamin. But there's this thing that it might come and it might go. You're still just a condiment. Nobody sits down and says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to have a plate of kraut and I'm going to put a side of, it's still just a side thing. And that's where it doesn't have huge potential in terms of, I don't think we're going to double our consumption, but then again, when it's not consumed that much, maybe it's easier to double your consumption. What do you people look at when you think about the consumption future?
It's interesting because a lot of the sauerkraut, and you're saying it absolutely right, is usually paired with a protein. We're seeing in some of our brands that it's being used more as a salad topping, but generally the bulk of the consumption comes in if you're eating pork chops, if you're eating brats, if you're eating a hot dog. It is paired up with a protein. We even see that during the year, if protein consumption starts to get a little soft, you see that the sauerkraut consumption starts to get a little soft with it, and then protein spikes, sauerkraut spikes with it. So it's been really good as protein is having a fantastic moment right now. A lot of people looking after including more protein in their diets, and meat having a really good moment. Sauerkraut goes with it. The way that we see is expanding the consumption of sauerkraut is in two fronts. There's pairing up with the protein, and then basically you peg yourself to this fast-growing category, and you try to compete within sauerkraut, making the tastier sauerkraut, making something that people appreciate, having a little spin in the flavor. So we talked about the simplicity of having simply sauerkraut, be cabbage, and salt. We have our number one formula has a little bit of garlic in it, and it's on fire. It sells extremely well because it has that differentiation on flavor. The other piece.
So ferment, as you said, the only ingredient is salt, except if you put a flavoring agent in there. Now, do you have to play the all natural thing, George? Is it like, hey, it's garlic, but it's not synthetic garlic? It's because I don't think that as valuable as what you have created, you don't want to bastardize it by then, oh, yeah, it's all natural except we use synthetic. That would be a tough sell.
Definitely, yeah. You don't want to have any yellow number 5 or artificial flavors and colors included in it by any means. So it's all natural flavors. Most of our portfolio that has flavors in them is actually organic as well. Okay. And it's easy for us. Most of it is sourced right here in Wisconsin. We talk to the farmers. We understand the sourcing in detail, and we're very, very serious about it. So differentiating.
I want to get the farming part. I want to make sure you tell me a little bit about the trend of the protein, trend. Because like I said, just had Faraday on talking about the hotness of protein. Before I do that, I want to real quickly then remind my listeners that this episode of the Business of Agriculture is brought to you by my friends at Redox Bio-Nutrients. It's a new year, and with the new year comes new hope for improved outcomes on your farming operation. One way you can achieve that is through the high-tech plant nutrition provided by Redox Bio-Nutrients. Redox is a family-owned company that's been in business since 1994. Redox provides superior nutrition with biostimulants focused on maintaining plant charge balance. All nutrients have a positive or negative charge. Maintaining charge balance allows plants to focus on yield and quality with improved performance come harvest time. You can find out more, including detailed information about Redox Grows. You can see the Redox Grows podcast. You can also find an actual person that can help you get their products in your area. Go to redoxgrows.com. That's redoxgrows.com. The hotness of protein's good. Of course, most people traditionally associate things like kraut and pickles with German type stuff, bratwurst and sausages and all that. But then, like you said, pork chops got into that.
Yeah.
The rise of the fermented thing almost went simultaneously in terms of the timeline with fake meat. Mm-hmm. And you're probably thinking, wait a minute, I don't know if this is the right thing that these go together. Fake meat has fizzled. Definitely. No rational human could look at the numbers and they can put their spin people out all they want. It tasted like shit. It was gross. It was disgusting. And it appealed for a brief amount of people that said, oh, I don't want to eat a cow, or I don't want to eat a pig, or I think I'm saving the earth. It never is caught. And I don't know that it ever will. That should be good for your line of products also, because again, natural. Cucumbers are natural. Cabbage is natural. Pigs are natural.
Look, Damian, let's go on a little bit of a time travel. Let's take us back here, maybe 9 years, and think about what was really hot in 2016 was nothing artificial in your food. That was what was really hot. You're saying no artificial colors, no artificial flavors. That's really what I wanted. I was there at Kraft Heinz. We had the no artificial colors mac and cheese coming to market. It was exciting. 2017, the plant-based starts to come in, but it wasn't clear that everything needed to be plant-based. I think the plant-based meat was a little bit of a stretch stretch, but it's where that trend was. 18 came all about transparency. What's in my food? What do I want here? 23, nutrition is number one. What am I getting in terms of nutrients out of my food? That's the big gap there. Is I think plant-based meats skip that part. Right. The nutrition was a major question mark, and the transparency was a major question mark. I saw that softness coming in when people are like, what is in this fake meat burger? What does it really have in content? And then it paled in comparison to actual meat. And now 2024, you're looking at functional foods. You're looking at foods that can help accomplish something for you, whether it be nootropics that can help with your mental health, or in our case, gut health through fermentation. The good thing about a sauerkraut, a fermented pickle, a kimchi, they check all of these boxes in sequence. They're building on that mountain, and they come in and they pair really well with things that people know are simple, are delicious, are nutritious, and a steak or eggs or a broth. It fits right in there, and the pairing is great. So we see the growth from pairing with meats, the growth from explaining to more people how they can do that and bringing it into your meal. And finally, the growth in occasions. A lot of the occasions that we see growing for us with our sauerkraut is putting it on top of a salad, on top of pizza, on top of other meals to incorporate that probiotic into their diets.
That part's cool. By the way, I think he said, I grant he's got a little Portuguese Brazilian accent, so a couple of his words, I think I'm like, wait a minute, he's gotten talking a little fast. But I think he said pairing it with eggs. Apparently, yes. George does not realize the demographic of my my listeners. I don't have billionaires listening to this. Who the hell can afford eggs right now, George? We're recording this in February of 2025. Eggs are more expensive than steak at this point.
Oh my gosh, I'll tell you. I went to Costco the other day, and I refrained from buying that egg there because it is to fall off your chair.
Yeah. So, and yes, George is having a good time, and yes, he is from Brazil, and he says he was a Division I swimmer. But if you look at him, if you're listening and not watching, tune into the YouTube version of this. He looks like he could almost have been a college wrestler. Doesn't have the cauliflower ears, but he's kind of looks like a badass. He might be the toughest looking Brazilian I've ever talked to be honest with you.
Hey, I'll take that as a big compliment. There's some tough looking guys out there.
All right, give me an analysis about, and I want to get to the production part of it, but I want to stay on the business side of it. The way the business works is you're a brand, and you now have a couple of brands. You've got Bubby's. You've got, I'm forgetting them here. I've got them written down. You've got them. The brands again are?
Bubby's, Wild Brine, Flanagan Farm.
Yes. Okay. I go into, and you're on a lot of stores. Mm-hmm. And you're the brand, and you are the processor. You're not just a pure branding agency. There are companies that just sell, market, promote, and they don't even touch the product. You touch the product.
Absolutely.
So you are, and you do process it, but you obviously don't grow it.
Right. We take it from the farms, and these are farmers with whom we have multi-generational relationships, right? That have been farming and selling cabbage to our company or brands that we have acquired for multiple generations. We are with them. We visit the fields. We watch them grow. We help them with variety selection. We talk about when is it going to be fertilized. We work with them on the schedule of when the harvest is going to come in so we can stagger our production in the plant. We're very close to production, and that's a big part of moving our headquarters here to Wisconsin. That was critical. So there were a couple of things that we considered. Then one was proximity to our plant, the major plant, the largest plant that makes about 90% of our volume is here in Bear Creek, Wisconsin. Small town. We're a big employer there. Very proud of that, how participative we can be in that community. The second piece is the proximity to our farmers and understanding what is going on. That for us is essential. I make a point to visit the farmers very frequently. We plan with them from the winter planning all the way to the harvest days. We're together with them. And it's essential to figure out and understand what is going on because, you have a heavy rain one day, it delays your harvest, it's going to delay your operation. We're very tied to it. And ultimately, because the sauerkraut expertise is here. Okay, it is here in the northern part of the Midwest. People eat it a lot, make it a lot. They understand it, and we want to participate in that market. So that was a big part in moving here to Wisconsin.
I think I've read Wisconsin, New York, Ohio. There's cabbage grown principally in maybe Michigan. I don't know. There's 3 or 4 states that grow the bulk of the cabbage, right?
Yeah. You're correct. New York State is a big grower. Ohio, Wisconsin, and Michigan are top 4.
What about cucumbers? Are they growing right around the corner from where you're sitting right now?
Yeah, there's a lot of fields here. Wisconsin grows a lot of cucumbers, so does Michigan. And Ohio is probably a little behind that, and Illinois runs quite a bit of cucumbers as well. And off season, you have a lot of it coming from Mexico these days, although we'll see what the tariffs look like down the road. But for the bulk of the summer season, nearly all of it comes here from the North Midwest.
Can you bring up an interesting point? Now we'll get into the tariffs here in a second, but from the business standpoint, you've got a contract. If I'm a dairy farmer in central Wisconsin, I've got my alfalfa, I've got my corn for corn silage, and then I've got do I have 100 acres every year that I rotate around and I put cabbage in there on a contract for you? Is that kind of how it works?
That's kind of how it works. Usually, the cabbage can only be grown every fifth year because of soil-borne disease that then needs to rotate. So black rot is the name of the disease. So we try not to grow in the same year. It really hurts the yield if you repeat the years because they have a high likelihood.
Which isn't unusual for most crops. Rotation helps because of disease issues. Cabbage, you said it's a black rot. That's in the roots?
That's in the root. Yeah, it comes from the soil. It starts to eat away at a cabbage head, and it dies off over time if you don't.
I'm assuming you could treat that with fungicide, but you're trying to avoid that?
We try to avoid that because we want to have mostly organic in this sense.
And your brands generally are not organic, but you do have some, or how's that? What's the
Yeah,
proportion?
Wild Brine is organic, and Flanagan Farm is organic. The Silver Floss brand, which is one that we haven't talked about, is not organic. I'd say probably 75% of our volume is conventional, 25% of our volume is organic.
Understood.
Yeah.
And,
But that's how it works. Basically, you have family farmers here that are farming some 1,000 acres, some a few hundred acres, and we work with them year in, year out on what that harvest is going to be and dole out the volume. Usually, to join our farming group, it is by referral. So one of existing farmers comes in and brings us in. We work with people that we trust. We want to have this long-term relationship. We want to work with people that we can count on, and then they know they can count on us as well.
you can produce, you can produce a boatload of cucumbers and cabbages on an acre. I mean, because remember, we're putting this isn't like bushels. You're a Brazilian guy. This isn't like bushels of soybeans that we're just going to put them on literally put them on ships that are as big as a city.
Right.
It's going into a jar, right? It's going in somebody's refrigerator. So
Right.
on a volume basis, I mean, is it ungodly? Is it like 20 tons of cabbage per acre or some crazy thing? Because you don't need a lot of acres to fill all those jars, right?
On the high end, you're going to have varieties that are going to yield 40 to 45 tons an acre on the high end. On the low end, you're probably going to have varieties that are bringing in 25. But that's
Even my guess of 20 was off by half.
yeah, it's a highly productive. It's a lot of water. It depends a lot on the rain and irrigation that we have. So in the central sense here in Wisconsin, most of our farmers have really good irrigation, so they have good control over what the yield is going to be. So it's a very productive crop for them. Up in the Shiocton area, in the Bear Creek area where our factory's at, the farmers out there, some have irrigation, some are down, so they rely a lot on the rain. Cabbage is going to be anywhere from 85 to 95% water, so they really depend on what the weather looks like.
What about the process that you're doing? Okay, so if I'm a farmer up there in there,
Yeah.
the average is probably seriously like 100 acres per contract, right?
Yeah, it might be a little less than that. Some of the fields are going to be like a 50-acre field, but if you're doing a 50-acre field, you're probably looking at 2,000 tons of cabbage.
Yeah.
That would come into our facility there. If you're getting that 40 ton an acre yield, usually it's machine harvested for the most part. The stuff that goes into our high yield lines, it's going to be machine harvested, loaded in the back of a truck, brought to us. It's dumped in the pad for the high production. Some of it is going to be hand harvested, put in a bin, and delivered to our factories for the artisanal process on the premium brands. And then
So if it's artisanal brand and it's got a little bit more of a story, you're hand harvesting.
hand harvest, place in a bin, brings the bin to our processing facility. It is then put into our shredding line. It's cleaned up, put into our shredding line. For the value brands, that is very high volume processing, it comes to the plant in a truck, and then from the truck, it is in the high processing line. It goes through a tumbler to remove the outer leaves, and then to a shredder.
So the tough part is, okay, so if you're a farmer, I get it guaranteed, right? I mean,
Yep.
I get guaranteed price. Is that all negotiated ahead of
Yeah,
time?
so we're going to contract tonnage with you. If you're a farmer, we're going to contract tonnage with you. We're going to say, hey, Damian, I'm looking for, just for easy example, easy math here. Let's say I'm going to get 1,000 tons from you this year. I'm going to pay you this much. And my expectation is they're going to deliver that on October 25th.
Yep.
Okay. Now we're playing ball here, and you're going to say, hey, looks like my harvest is going to be a little early. I got a lot of sun. I got a lot of water. I'm a little early here. Can you get it for me? Or it looks like I could use a few more weeks here to yield up and get my tonnage up.
So you've got a person that's a kind of a field scheduler, I'm guessing, that says,
Yeah.
this county over here got the best weather. They're going to be early. This county over here is behind. We're swapping people around because you're not going to screw them. You need the cabbage. Just you've got to make it so that it comes to the plant as best you can to make sure that plant is running at capacity but not backing up.
Correct. And I don't want to run the cabbage that is too mature and doesn't ferment too well. And I don't want to run the cabbage that's too young, has too much sugar in it. So we try to get the sweet spot. We're always talking to the farmers, always understanding where they are in the growing journey of the cabbage to make sure that we're picking it up at the right time.
Yeah, this is a neat aspect. So it's a nice little, most of the people I know that have produced value, like in my part of the world, red gold tomatoes is there. And I've known guys that have, they'll grow 100 acres of red gold tomatoes in addition to their corn and soy and their other stuff. But you've got to have specialized equipment. I mean, it takes a hell of a lot more work to grow 100 acres of something specialty than it does, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It does. It's definitely a high dedication crop. And then our farmers say that it pays off, right? It's specialized. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of coordination, selection of seeds, growing, weeding it. If you're growing organic, and a lot of the farmers decide to hand weed it to make sure that you're not competing with the weeds for the nutrients and growing to the right tonnage, it takes a lot of work, a lot of dedication, for sure.
And and you give them guidance. In fact, you give them stipulations, I assume, on varieties. You say, you're getting, we're buying 100,000 tons off of you, and it's going to be this variety, and here's the parameters.
Correct. So we have specific varieties. Our technical services folks, I myself sometimes travel. Most of the seeds come from Europe. We study the varieties that we want that are not disease prone, that have the right yield. We agree with the farmers on, hey, this variety has a bit more yield, so it's going to be good for you, like what to expect out of productivity per acre. Bring it back, and we have a good sense of how many seeds we're going to have for every feed, how dense there's going to be, the planting of that seed, and they get some predictability on the cost per acre, the revenue per acre they get to expect, and make sure they make a smart decision about how to allocate their land.
And sugar beets are kind of this way on a certain quantity, and potatoes can be this way. So if all of a sudden I kill it and I have 40% more than I contracted, I'm not just having to go and dump this and feed it to the cows. There might be some other guy that had terrible weather, and so you'll still buy my overage if you need it based on where the production comes in.
Right. So let's say we're expecting you to have 40 tons an acre, but you're just very efficient this year. You got really good water. You're coming in at 50 tons an acre. I commit to the 40 for sure. So that one I'm going to take no matter what is 40 tons an acre. If you come in and you're at 50, I guarantee that I purchase at least 10% more than my commitment to you. Right, so I come to you and say, Damian, 40 tons an acre. If you get to 44, I guarantee that I'll purchase that. I can't guarantee that I'm going to purchase if you get 60, for example, right? Because all of a sudden I just can't process it, but I have a high ceiling that I guarantee. But we grow with enough people that I know some people are going to have a weak season, some people are going to have a strong season.
So you're patching in. You're patching in.
We patch everything in, and we have some minimum guarantees as well. That if you have specifically towards the end, if we see that there's something going on with the weather, if we can't bring you in and your cabbage freezes out in the field, we work with you there to make sure that you're not underwater.
George, one of the things I want to get about then what happens in the off season. We're recording this in February, and I know that there's no cabbage being harvested in Wisconsin right now. Before I get to the what do you do in the off season question, I want to talk to my listeners about a solution for you and your agricultural operation, especially if you are a larger scale production agricultural person. It's a company called Gripp, Gripp. Gripp as the easiest way to track anything and everything, safeguarding your records, your asset information, and automating your equipment reminders. Gripp's familiar chat-like interface is loved by by farmers. It's so simple. Your flip phone toting grandpa will ask for an iPhone. With automatic Spanish to English translations and picture capture, it's no wonder that farmers across America are ditching their handwritten notes and their texting for Gripp. In other words, it's a system for you to keep all of your employees on the same page. It's amazing. You got to check this stuff out. So you can keep all your tribal knowledge and your conversations on your farm, on your agricultural operation at your fingertips. You do not require an app. It does not require a password. You just use this and it makes your life better. Get a grip on your operation this spring. New subscribers will get 20% off. It's right. You can use this on your farm to help your farming operation. You get 20% off with code Damian20. That's my name, like it's on this background right here. Damian20 at grip.ag. That's GRIPP.ag. Okay, first off, you're going to have to be more expensive than that Vlasic vinegar stuff because they shred a head of cabbage, fling it into a vat with some vinegar, and then put it in a jar. Yours is fermented. I know as a hobbyist processor, it takes 3.5 to 5 weeks for me to go from grinding it and layering it with salt in that crock to then it being ready to go into a jar. Vlasic ain't sitting on cabbage for 3 to 5 weeks in the fermentation process. So you've got to have space, facilities, you've got to have time, and so you've got to charge more. Talk to me about that. You're the guy that went and got an MBA, right? You got an MBA, don't you?
I did get an MBA, yeah.
So you know about money and business? Talk to me. Have you ever had this much fun on a podcast, George?
No, this has been a fun conversation. I love it. It's an interesting business model because on the bulk preparation side, we actually prepare everything up front. If you show up to our plant, it is here in Bear Creek, the largest manufacturing plant in the world for sauerkraut. We're processing a lot of cabbage every day. So everything is going to come in between late July, early August, and end of October. We try to get our entire season in during that period.
Late July until first week of October, probably at the latest, right?
No, late October. We're able to stretch it out through late October. The cabbage is coming in pretty cold, but it's still processable.
It's not. It doesn't. Yeah, because if it gets a hard freeze, it changes the structure of the.
Oh yeah, you don't let it freeze. You cannot freeze. If it's frozen, you lose the cabbage. The cell structure of the cabbage is not to get too nerdy about the cabbage itself, but if you break the cell structure of the cabbage after freezing, then it's going to turn into mush. It's not going to ferment well.
George, if you were ever going to geek out with any person about how to make perfect kraut, and you got the guy here. It's okay. My listeners are coming
here's
right
an
along
open
with it.
invitation, Damian. If you want to see us make a lot of sauerkraut, feel free to come and just give me a ring. You can visit us anytime. Process.
Look, when I have a speaking engagement, for an ag event in Wisconsin, I don't want to come there in February. I want to come there when things are humming. But anyway, go ahead.
You can come in. So we're shredding all this cabbage. We're loading up our tanks. These tanks are very large, and they ferment anywhere between a month and a half to 9 months. Because the cabbage that comes in at a higher temperature is going to ferment faster. The cabbage that comes in late October is going to be very cold. So the fermentation process is going to be very slow. It's going to take them months to do. And then
you don't mind that because as soon as it's ready from the fermentation is when you want to put it in a jar. So
exactly.
You don't mind that there's different amounts of time required for the fermentation. The tough part, I would think, would be, are these all stainless steel vats?
Yeah, enormous stainless steel vats.
Like 5,000 gallons or something.
A lot more than that. They're 1.5 million pounds.
Okay, so these things are. So the point is, like, people get excited going into a brewery and all that. That stuff might sit around for a couple weeks, 8 months. Those stainless steel tanks in that warehouse in Bear Jaw, Wisconsin, that ain't free. I mean, you got a lot of money tied up.
There's a lot of capital tied up in that. And then there's the artisanal crowd that is always processing fresh cabbage, right? The artisanal crowd then in Wisconsin, we're going to use our entire season. And then we start to get cabbage that is fresh from other places because this is fermented in a 1,000-pound batch. It's cleaned by hand, it's shredded in a small format, and it's then has the freight coming in from other places, and the fermentation is then controlled there, but it's still at a minimum 3 weeks of fermentation. Because what we're looking for is for the acidity to develop and for the pH to come down and that tangy flavor to develop in the cabbage. Otherwise, I'm just giving you coleslaw, and that's not the idea here. Yeah. So I need that tangy flavor to develop. So you're right, it takes up a significant amount of capital, it costs a significant amount of money to do it, but we still manage to be quite competitive out in market. The artisanal kraut with the organic, it kind of starts at $4.99 a pound. That's our Flanagan Farm brand, and it goes all the way up to about $10 a jar. That's Bubby's, and this is stuff that is manually made, that is on a controlled, always 3 weeks of fermentation, really specific cuts. The more popular value brands that we make, Silver Flaws, you can find that at Walmart, for example. These are fermented in these medium pound vats. Those are probably like $3.99 for 2 pounds. And it's a
what's the brand? What's the brand that I would find that's more value at Walmart?
Silver Floss.
Silver
Floss is the #1 brand of sauerkraut in the country.
Silver Floss?
Silver Floss, yeah.
It's floss like I floss my teeth?
Exactly, because it's a very white, thin shred of sauerkraut.
Okay. So that's, and you are the leading sauerkraut producer in North America.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. We are. We produce a lot of pounds of cabbage.
And because you have enough different brands, and this is, and even the cheap stuff is still fermented, not vinegared.
Yeah, none of it is vinegar. All of it is fermented.
Okay, so then you've got some empty vats right now.
Yeah. So we cycle through our vats every year, so they start emptying up and get prepared to then receive cabbage
again in July. Okay,
yeah.
So right now you and I are recording this in February. Why don't you just go ahead and get on the horn and have a train load or a couple truckloads of cabbages hauled in from Mexico to then fill the vats? Is that something you will do or do?
If we have any shortage of production in Wisconsin, we do source from other parts of the country. The only place where we're sourcing from other parts of the country right now is for the artisanal line. Everything else, it's our best interest to source locally. And a big reason for that is because the #1 differentiator in the taste of the sauerkraut is the cabbage. The #2 is the type of bacteria that is in the soil that gives the right taste. So our farmers have the right soil, and we make sure of that because we're spraying sauerkraut juice on that Wisconsin soil to inoculate it with the right type of bacteria that we want to give the quality of kraut that we like.
And I promised the listener that we would get to the regenerative part of it because I think that's a cool story. The point is, you've got leftover brine, and you could just open up the drain and send it down, but you don't. You make it available to your contract producers to come and get it, and you require it or encourage it that they use it?
So we require that some of the growers, specifically for the artisanal kraut, spray it. So they spray with the sauerkraut juice from the prior season that has the appropriate mix of bacteria that we want to give our taste. That's one big thing.
So so the person that's, again, I don't mind that we geek out on cabbage texture and this is, and we got a lot of people here that know about agronomics. The thought here is, not the thought, the practice is, if you're going to grow for us next year, you come and get this leftover byproduct, this brine, and you spray it on that field, which would have been in corn or something else previously, alfalfa, whatever. Correct. And because that's the field that's going to go to cabbage next year that we're going to buy, and we want that bacteria to be in that soil, so you require it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it has the bacteria that we want in the soil now, and then it's going to ferment, and the bacteria that's going to be there is the bacteria that gives the taste that I want.
So you talked about referring, George. If I were being referred, you said, I need to pick up another 50 acres of cabbage, and I'd like it to be over in this county. That way it gives us some protection from weather patterns and whatever. I come meet with you now, and you say, great, I don't want you to, I can't have you farming. I can't take your cabbage this year because you haven't sprayed it. Is it that meticulous? You say, next year, you're going to spray our brine on the field. The year after that, you'll be producing 26.
It's not an absolute requirement because I can mix you in the same tank with sauerkraut that already has the bacteria that I want. And the bacteria proliferates and can give it that taste. So it's on a case by case. But if you're on the artisanal side, I definitely going to want you to spray it.
You've got a couple of food scientists working for you, I imagine.
Yeah, we have a deep science team. We're analyzing the pH and the acidity of the sauerkraut and the types of acids that are created by different types of bacteria, the length of fermentation, the temperature of fermentation. We keep really good records of what we need to do to replicate that process because it's still at large scale. It is fairly easy to make sauerkraut to a certain scale. It's very hard to scale it up to the millions of pounds.
I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I was going to wait till the end of this interview and tell you that I would like to be considered in my retirement job to be a taster Just
All
an
right.
idea. Just an idea. No, that's all kidding aside.
Yeah,
Someone's tasting the stuff. You
there
can't.
is. That's so funny. So Cameron is actually our taster in the
Because you
factory.
can't just say, well, it's been in the vat for this much and the pH level says this and the temperature says this. Hell, that don't matter because you're selling a product that a consumer is going to take home. If they open it up and say, I've been a customer of Bubby's or Silver Floss, this tastes different. Or worse yet, this tastes crappy. You don't want that.
You
You
don't
have to
want
have a
that. You
consistency.
want the consistency. So we actually have that job in the factory. So Cameron is the technician that is out there, and he's opening up the sauerkraut. He's tasting. He's measuring the pH, measuring the acidity. But ultimately, the number one job is picking it up and making sure that it tastes right. That's the key thing. And he'll kick out. He'll kick out a tote. He'll kick out a batch if it doesn't taste quite right. Say, hey, this is not ready to pack. Take it out.
So kicking it out means it doesn't get dumped. It just means unless it went too long. I guess there could be the case where it goes too far and then the entire vat's wasted, but you wouldn't allow that to happen.
No, so we're always testing the vat, and that we can identify by the pH of the vat, right? So you want it to be at the right point. We had problems in the past, specifically with organic, where it turns into mush because the acid eats through the cell structure of the cabbage and it turns into mush. So we have studies to prevent that. We haven't had that, knock on wood, again. So we have good controls around it. But if the quality is not right, we will kick it out and it gets dumped. So we were very serious about the quality of the product.
I'm afraid, actually, I don't want to be your taster because I love kraut so much that I'm afraid that like too much of something you love. I mean, like being a beer taster or a gynecologist, it might just be too much. I'm just saying. Anyway, what about the mush thing? Because I had that problem before when it finally had the right smell and taste, it had gone too far and it got mushy. Because that's the tough part about fermentation, George.
Yep.
It goes. I mean, and then that's where, and you talk about you would lose if your vat turns, if you let something sit around for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. That's a hell of a bunch of loss. You can't afford that. So you guys have to be really on it.
Yeah, in 2022, we lost $1 million to mushy kraut. That's a staggering amount for a company like ours. I know for some big ag company out there, it might be just another day in their lives. But for us, it's very, very meaningful. So we had to go out and study exactly what happened. And what we found out is the variety of cabbage that we were fermenting paired with the temperature that it came in caused the cell structure to be very weak. And as it came in, we fermented it for several months. And the acid ate through the cell structure. It had not absorbed enough calcium out in the field, and it basically destroyed the cell structure. You had applesauce with kraut flavor at the end of it, and it goes straight out in the dump, and that's not something that we want. It's wasted food. It's wasted resources. It's not good product if we fail to pick it up, to put in front of our consumers. So we adjusted it. We adjust the variety. We measure the temperature that it comes in, and we measure very carefully how the acidity and the pH are evolving.
So the future of this, you came from the bigs, the great bigs.
Yeah.
I think the opportunity for a smaller brand is better than it's ever been. I mean, I've been on the record of saying if I owned a stock in, and I'm not being mean, and I've worked for these companies, General Mills, Kellogg's, Nabisco. I'm telling you, this RFK thing, he may or may not be the new health and human services person, but this fuse got lit. And this thing about boxed, processed seed oils, preservatives, it's hotter as a topic of, and I think it's different than the GMO thing. The GMO thing was all hysteria, generally foolishly hysteric, right?
Yep.
This one's different because you can look at the guy sitting next to you on the airplane, like, this guy weighs 400 pounds and is 24 years old and is already on 6 different drugs and diabetic. There's a real link between sugars and processed food and their adoption or consumption and the obesity rise and diabetes rise. I'm not in any way getting a wacko. Hell, I'm just drinking a Coca-Cola. I'm talking to you. But George, it seems to me there's some real changes going to be coming in the next few years. Do you feel that?
Certainly. Oh, I feel that absolutely. We have some survey in the back of this. If you look at, Numerator is one of our insights provider here, and you look at what is the number one factor in feeling physically healthy. The number one thing that people said was blood pressure. The number two thing was digestion and gut health. Number two, gut health has gone up 10 times. If you look at Google searches over time since 2016 until 2025, it's a tenfold increase. I'm not saying 10%. I'm saying it was 1 and now it's 10.
Yeah.
And you look at the most important symptoms that people are trying to remedy, what is it that you're trying to remedy? The number one symptom that people are trying to remedy through food is digestive symptoms. So for sure, it is here to stay. It is top of mind. People are looking for ways to feel better. They understand it now that their diet is a big, big part in how they feel and what their health is going to look like, and they're looking for alternatives. It is certainly a big win in the sales of fermented and naturally preserved foods.
I agree. You told me I was ahead of the curve, as usual, trendsetter.
Yeah.
You told me I was low carb before that was popular
Oh,
also.
look at that.
You told me a dollar amount of annual sales. I don't know if, since you're privately held, if you're allowed to say that publicly on my air. Are you?
I'd rather not share.
Okay. Okay. Then let's just go. Let's just go this way.
But
Let's just go
enough to
this.
say that we sell a lot of sauerkraut. We're not a big company by any means. We're growing a lot. We've been growing at about 15% a year, and we expect to continue to
That was going to
stay
be
at that pace and pick up.
that was going to be my thing.
Yeah.
Let's face it. You worked for JBS. Without acquisition, if somehow they bought Tyson.
Right.
Which, oh my God! Imagine the anti-meat monopoly protesters when that happened. We went from 4 big processors to 3. That's the only way they're going to grow by a lot. In general, these things that are almost more oligopolistic or huge players, and you can talk about the Cargills or the ConAgras or the Kraft Heinz or whatever, they're already where they are. They're not going to probably grow by 15% a year in terms of sales without an acquisition. The thing about being more nimble and small, even though you're the biggest sauerkraut producer, you can grow by that. That's just purely by getting on more shelves, because maybe sauerkraut consumption grows, but it's also, are you taking it? It's a little bit of both. Growth of consumption of the product, period, and then also you're stealing it from Vlasic. Is that where it comes?
There is a good amount of taking share from brands that are not delivering on the health front, that are not delivering on the gut health front. There is growth of share from people that prefer our products because it tastes better, for sure. But the most that we see in growth is growth of the category. That is the key thing, is growth of fermented foods, growth of sauerkraut. As a category, sauerkraut has been growing, and it grows by people becoming more aware that it's a health food. A lot of the people that eat sauerkraut eat it simply because it tastes good. And it checks the box, right? But more people are finding out that it tastes good. If you go on TikTok, I don't have TikTok, but when people tell me where gut health is having its moment, it's over 1 billion impressions on TikTok. And it's the young folks that are coming out there and figuring it out. Hey, I'm looking at this, potentially taking a drug, an Ozempic or a Wegovy to regulate my appetite. Is there a natural way to do this? And there is, right? So fermented foods are out there. They can help you regulate your blood sugar. They can help you regulate your appetite. They've been there for a while, and people can leverage that. Sauerkraut, for example, has about 100 times more probiotic than yogurt. And everybody takes yogurt for
Right.
As people find out more about it, it continues to grow.
By the way, I mean, you're a little younger than me. I'm in my mid 50s. I'm glad that the younger people are getting into sauerkraut. It tells me that means there'll be lots of sauerkraut around for me. I'm happy they switched off of Tide Pods. The goofy little shits were eating Tide Pods like 5 years ago on social media. You remember that?
I do remember that.
So anyway, you're one of the more knowledgeable CEOs about every facet. You talked about production. We haven't even got into pickles, which is fine. We're going to do that in the future. You're going to come back. Would you come back another year and talk about pickles?
Oh, absolutely. Love to.
I just wanted to stay on kraut because of the fermented health and also the food brand. So the last thing about that food brand, you're growing because of growth of category. You are taking some share from others, and the retail. Yeah, this is one thing I think, but again, I try to go everything from the farm all the way to the table. It seems to me even the Walmarts and the Krogers and these other ones have obviously become more receptive, and it must be because of pull through from the consumer to putting a smaller brand on that shelf, whereas it seems like, based on my agricultural economics degree and going to groceries and studying this, you had to be a Kroger, Mondelez, Nabisco, Kraft Heinz, start naming the big ones to get primary Kellogg's, Generals. You had to be to get on that shelf. You're buying the space. It seems like something has shifted. It's just because of the consumer demanding it, or did the retailers actually start trying to get more open-minded? What happened?
There are two things here. One, when we talk to retailers, we really talk to them about being leaders in the category. and looking at what people want and how can you give it to them. They're very worried about us being able to supply them. But then I bring them to my Bear Creek plant and I show you the power of that plant, what we have built. We invested $15 million in upgrading this plant to make sure that we can process enough to service the mainstream market.
So one of their things is they say, yeah, we aren't opposed to carrying you because all they care about is making a margin, right? I think Kroger would they'd put up anything. They'd put up a bag of, open air if they could sell it and make their little margin. Their concern is, I can't have your stuff only available for 3 months, or it's not a seasonal product like selling Halloween decorations or something, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough job to operate a grocery store, curate everything, make sure you have everything on shelf. So they want to know, does your brand have legs? Is it going to survive? Is it going to perform well? We have been in Kroger shelves with Bubby's now for over 5 years, continue to grow every year at 15%, haven't had a single service issue. Now, why is that? It's because we're always thinking ahead. We're investing in our production ahead. Putting the production here in Wisconsin was a great way for us to ensure that we have a cabbage supply, that we can expand our production capability, that we have enough pounds to put out there. Now, the second thing that they're going to look at is, can you support your brand? Can you invest back to make sure your brand grows? And the third thing that they're going to look at is it going to outplay something that are going to think is going to outsell you, right? Are your velocities on shelf good enough? And we've proven time and again that yes, it is. It continues to contribute. It continues to sell more. So it's a pretty exciting proposition for them too.
So when I said that it seems like there's more of an openness or an embrace of doing that, you said there was two things. First off, they wanted to make sure that you were able to supply them, because all of a sudden, if they put you in 2,300 stores or whatever it should be, they can't just have it there and all of a sudden, oh yeah, plant's down. And then was there another one that you got to?
Yeah, right? The second one is, do people actually want to buy this? Because what story do you have to tell? Are they buying it somewhere else? And
the grocery store looks at turn. A grocery store looks at turn, and a lot of people, even in ag, George, don't think about that. Remember, they're working on razor thin margins. They need turn.
Exactly.
They need turn. They need that stuff to get on the shelf, off the shelf, on the shelf, off the shelf.
On the shelf, off the shelf. And a lot of what they want to understand is this going to be actually incremental? Because there's no empty shelves in grocery stores. I mean, barring the COVID lockdowns and whatnot, but if you walk on a given Tuesday at your local Kroger supermarket, the shelves are stocked. There's no empty spaces there. So for you to come in, something has to come out. Mm-hmm. So they're looking at, if I sell $10 of this item this week, on an average week, is your item going to sell more than that? Is units per store per week is the key metric? And I have to demonstrate to them that, yes, I can keep pace with you. I can sell, and I'm going to invest back for more people to know my product. And the other piece is the story, right? You have to be able to show that not only I'm going to sell well today, but my product is on an uptrend. If I'm selling 10 units per store per week this year, next week is going to be 13. The week after that is going to be 16. I'm going to continue to grow. You can invest with me here, and I'll help you grow your category.
I'm like ready to go and eat some sauerkraut right now. I mean, this is how excited I am. I really am. And I'm excited for your growth, and I'm excited you came on here. By the way, the brands that Fermented Food Holdings has, we've talked about Bubby's, Wild Brine, Flanagan Farm, you said is artisan, higher end, organic. Mm-hmm. Silver Floss, I might find it in the more value category.
Yeah, you'll find it your Save Mart, your Walmart is going to be.
And then your other brands are the pickles, I presume.
The Bubby's is a pickle brand. Bubby's is one of the only fully fermented brands of pickles in the country. There's no vinegar in that. It's fermented in barrels with a salt brine.
But what I'm saying is Bubby's is a kraut brand, Wild Brine is a kraut brand, Flanagan Farm is a kraut brand, Silver Floss is a kraut brand.
Yes. Wild Brine has kimchi and sauerkraut, and Bubby's has sauerkraut and pickles.
Okay. And Flanagan Farm, only kraut, Silver Floss, only kraut.
Correct.
Severn, Hawthorne Foods in Cortland Valley, those are...
Only kraut.
Only kraut.
Yep.
There's a lot of them there. I'm excited. I'm excited just to even think about this. All right. His name is Jorge Azevedo. He's the CEO of FFH Fermented Food Holdings. If you want to find him, are you on LinkedIn?
I am on LinkedIn. I have no other social media, but LinkedIn I do have.
I'm going to connect with you on LinkedIn as soon as I hang up with this. And if they want to find, if the listener wants to find out more about all your brands or all of the stuff they can learn, where do they go?
FermentedFoodHoldings.com. Or our social media brands, Wild Brine, Bubby's, Flanagan Farms, all on Instagram.
You're awesome. Thank you for being here. If you enjoyed this, please do go to my YouTube and hit subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. We're trying to make a concerted effort in 2025 to grow our YouTube. And while you're kicking around on social media, also check out my new show. It's called The Granary. I'm doing it in conjunction with my friends at Extreme Ag. We're shooting this show, me talking to my farm guys at my on-farm tavern in Indiana, The Granary, sitting there talking about real stuff. Eventually, I might have to get my friend George down there. Do you think you could sit in a barn and talk and drink beer and talk to a guy about ag stuff?
That'd be fantastic. I'd love to do it.
All right. Till next time, thank you very much for being here. Thank you, George, for being on here. Great. I'm telling you, I'm ready to eat a sauerkraut plate right now.
All right. I'm going to ship you some.
All right. Thank you very much. Till next time, thank you for being here. I'm Damian Mason, and this is The Business of Agriculture. Are you an agricultural company looking to reach farmers and ranchers eager for your products and services? Look no further than AGvisorPRO. This innovative platform creates instantaneous connections between businesses and farmers who are interested in what you have to offer. By partnering with AGvisorPRO, you can engage directly with a targeted audience, answer questions in real time, and showcase your expertise in the industry. Don't miss this opportunity to grow your brand and connect with engaged customers. Join AGvisorPRO today, where farmers meet trusted companies just like yours in an instant. To learn more about partnering with AGvisorPRO to enhance your business, email them info@agvisorpro.com. That's info@agvisorpro.com.